But thank you all for joining us here today. This is John Elam speaking. I'm a SharePoint team member here at Protiviti. Today's presentation is on SharePoint Business Intelligence. So thank you all for joining us here today. So want to move forward. And for those of you who don't know, Protiviti is a global consulting firm. We do focus a lot on risk and business, internal audit, and we do a lot of IT work here at Protiviti. We have offices all over the world. And as you can see here, sorry about that, as you can see here, we have offices in all these various places, a lot of offices here in the States. The SharePoint Solutions Group, we have 4 main focuses here at Protiviti. We do a lot of work with consulting, so designing and creating public sites, intranets, extranets, public-facing sites, along with some business intelligence, as we'll talk about today. And sorry about that. And some design, web strategy, and some mobile work as well. On the support side, we have something called SharePoint Managed Services. You may have known it under the name of SharePoint On Call previously. And this group focuses exclusively on supporting our clients and helping them achieve greater business returns. And you just give us a call, send us a note there, and we can help you out on that front. And then training, obviously that's the front we're working on here. We do most of our work is private on-site, so with companies we'll come in, we'll do a lot of work helping companies with specific skill sets, and then on top of that, helping companies with specific skill sets, or in that process, help them really drive user adoption. And that's one of the big focuses we do here as well, along with some public training, as we'll be offering a little later here in September. And then obviously we have some add-ons. We do a lot of work with Nintex, with workflows and forms, and some other partners there. So for today, just an overview, we have the business intelligence for SharePoint as today's topic. It's the second webinar in the series. It's presented again by Ann Wallinger, and she's a solution architect here at Protiviti. It'll be 1 hour long, about 1 hour long. We hope to end a minute or two before 2 o'clock, just so that everyone's able to get to that next meeting and hopefully make it back to another one of these webinars we put on here. So if you have questions, there's a question window in the bottom right. Feel free to submit questions there. Love to see those questions. We will save the questions until the end, and we'll take a minute just to review the questions to make sure we can answer as many as possible. So please do submit questions if you have them. We try to get answered to them all in the course, but if at the end some of them are more challenging, we may email you afterwards, but we'll definitely get back to you with all your questions. So again, please do submit those questions, and we'll save some time at the end just for those. The session is being recorded, so it'll be up on our YouTube channel, Protiviti, our youtube.com/ProtivitiSP. So feel free to check that out. It's definitely something worthwhile. We've got some videos up there, and more getting posted almost every day, it seems like. Again, the focus for today is a deep dive into PowerPivot and Power View. We'll talk a little bit about broader BI capabilities within SharePoint, but we really want to focus and do a deep dive into PowerPivot and Power View. And again, just a quick reminder, this course, this is a webinar. It's sort of an introduction to some of the material and that will be covered in the full course, the Business Intelligence course, presented by Ann as well, on September 23rd and 24th, both in McLean, Virginia, and online. So if questions are interested in that, our contact information will be available here at the end. So feel free to reach out to us about that, or message us or chat us there in the box. But love to see you all there. If you have any questions, this is a very good introduction. So about today's presenter, for those of you who are not at our last event, Ann is a Microsoft certified technical specialist with a business degree from UVA and a master's in software engineering from Harvard. She's a solution architect for Protiviti, and she does a lot of work in the BI workflow space and a ton of work in the performance optimization space. She's got more than 10 years of experience in the BI field and has won several pretty major industry awards, and very well known in that space. So we love to have Ann as part of our team here, and without further ado, I'd love to introduce her here today. So here you go, Ann.
Okay, there we go. Thank you everyone for coming today. So we're going to quickly walk through the agenda. Basically, I'm going to give you a short overview of Excel services, Performance Point, and Report Builder, and then we're going to jump into that deep dive for PowerPivot and Power View. And finally, we'll leave about 5 minutes at the end for any questions you have. So just go ahead and put your questions in the chat window, and we'll save them for the end. So first, just to talk a little bit about the way that the tools work in the SharePoint model. We start with the first tool where you want to actually create your data model. So that's the process of pulling together all that data that you want to be able to create reports and share reports for. So in our SharePoint sort of Microsoft world, the tools we have there are SQL, and that includes SSIS, which is SQL Server Integration Services. SSAS is SQL Server Analysis Services, that's cubes, and SSRS is SQL Server Reporting Services. So all of those tools can be used in the data model creation process. You can also use Excel and PowerPivot in this area. If you just have maybe some data that's in a large Excel file, then you don't have to have a relational database. The next step is to create reports, and that's where we get into the next set of tools. Again, you can use Excel not only for housing your data in the data model, but also for creating your reports and publishing them in SharePoint. Visio is another tool in this area that you can use to connect to data and visualize it. In the SSRS world, you've got two different tools, Report Builder, which has been around for many years, and Power View, which is new in the last year and a half. And you can also use SQL Server data tools in lieu of Report Builder, which is basically a scaled down version of Visual Studio that has the BI templates built into it. It used to be known as BIDS, the Business Intelligence Design Studio. And finally, Performance Point is another tool that you can use to create reports. It's Excel's with analytical data, that's cubed data, so not just a flat SQL table, but an actual OLAP data source. So we have all of those tools available to create our reports, and then the final step is to publish them so that other users can view our reports, and that's where we use SharePoint. So all of these different reports can be published directly into your SharePoint portal. So for Excel services, again, this is just going to be very high level. Just be aware that it's out there. It's part of SharePoint. If you have the enterprise license, you have it already. And the purpose of Excel services is to render your Excel workbooks with your reports in the browser. So as a report writer, you can use the Excel tool to go ahead and create all of your fancy charts with slicers and all of those things that you want to have to interact with your data, and then you publish them into SharePoint and users can see them even though those end users don't have Excel on their local workstations. So it really takes a lot of the requirements for software licensing out of the picture when you're trying to deal with who can see your different reports and things like that. You can hook it up to data that can be refreshed on an automatic basis, so you might want to hook it up to a SQL table or any OLADB or ODBC data source. You can schedule it in SharePoint so every time you view it, it refreshes automatically, or you can schedule it so that it refreshes on, say, every hour. And it's one of the benefits of using Excel, even though it's kind of a common tool that you might not think of right away for business intelligence, is that you really have a lot of control over your print and your export functionality. So some of the other tools like Performance Point that we'll look at, very highly interactive, but they're not really very printable. So those are things to consider when you're picking the right tool for the right job. And Performance Point, as I said, you really want to hook this up to what we call an OLAP data source. So you're talking about an analysis services cube or a PowerPivot workbook, and we're going to build a PowerPivot file today, so you'll know more what that means shortly. You can hook Performance Point up to just a simple SQL table, but you won't be able to do many of the things with it that you can do with the cube. So you get KPIs, that's key performance indicators, scorecards, charts, dashboards, again, very highly interactive so that you can do ad hoc analysis. If you unleash it to your power users, they'll be able to drill into that data and answer their own questions and create their own reports using that functionality. And Report Builder is the original tool that came with SQL Server Reporting Services. Again, it's very good. It's like Excel, it's very good at having print formats and being able to export to different layouts. You can export it to Excel or comma separated values or PDFs or Word and several other XML. There's a bunch of them, so it's great in that area. It is more complex to develop these reports, so you might need to be more on the developer side than just a Power user to be able to use Report Builder. The most important thing is if you're familiar with tools like SQL to be able to use it, but it's also just not quite as intuitive as something like Excel is. So those tools are all available, but we're going to jump into the next one, which is PowerPivot. And I'll just tell you real quick about it, and then we're going to go into a demo for the rest of today's presentation. So basically, PowerPivot allows you to create a cube without really realizing that you did create a cube. It allows you to pull all of your data into Excel, and with a click of a button, it goes behind the scenes and builds the cube for you. And once you have the cube, it opens up that world of being able to use new reporting tools like Power View and Performance Point on top of the cube that you built. It does allow you to create hierarchies in the data. So for example, if you wanted to have a date hierarchy that drills down from year to quarter to month, you can do that. You can also do key performance indicators and calculated fields using a formula called DAX, which is similar to Analysis Services MDX, if you're familiar with that. And again, it's all publishable to SharePoint. So let's look one more slide here is Power View. And that's going to be the tool that we add reports on top of our PowerPivot cube. So it's a very easy tool to use, I think. We'll take a look and you can make that decision for yourself, but basically you connect it to your PowerPivot cube or your existing analysis service cube, and you're able to drag and drop and create some pretty pleasing visual reports. So without further ado, give us a second here. We're going to switch over presenters and jump into my demo. Okay, so you're looking at SQL Management Studio right now. And basically this is a diagram of my data because we are going to build a cube from the bottom up today. So this is just a quick look at what kind of data I have in my database. It's just a regular SQL relational database. The main thing that I'm focused on is membership, this table right here in the middle. And I've got a date in there, so I have membership statistics for every month basically. And my membership is linked to people and organizations, and you can have different products. So you might be a general member, or you might be a student member, for example. I track the person's salary range for demographics and their status. I have member types, and there is kind of a hierarchy here for the locations. So I want to know what region, and drill down to area, and drill down to state that these people live in for my membership. So very typical kind of data that you might find reporting for. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Excel. And note this is just Excel. We're not doing anything SharePoint at this time. And you can do this in 2010 or 2013. There's a free add-in for PowerPivot. With 2010 version of Excel, you have to actually download it, I believe, and install it. But again, it's free and it's out there. You can Google it. With 2013, it's there, and you usually just have to activate the COM admin to see it add in. So if you go looking for that, basically you go under Options and Add-ins, and you go to COM add-ins, and you should see there Microsoft Office PowerPivot. So I've got that turned on, and because it's on, I see the PowerPivot tab in my ribbon. And I'm going to click on the Manage button, which actually opens a second Excel window that's just for PowerPivot. You can see the ribbon here changed to be PowerPivot specific. And I'm going to get some data, so I'll go to my database. In this case, it's from SQL Server. You can bring it in from all sorts of different data sources, Oracle, all those things. And this is on my local machine, and my database is BI2. And now it asks me, would I like to write a query to pull back all of my data, or would I like to select from a list of tables? And I'm going to go ahead and select from tables and views. And in this case, there's a whole bunch of them that are kind of related, as you saw in my data model. So give me a second to check off all these different boxes. And actually, I'm going to grab a couple of them. I'm going to grab views so you can see the difference in how a view and a table works in this case. So we've got salary. I have some business logic written into my views. So for example, my product and my view, I actually built in a hierarchy, whereas I don't have that in my table. So there are cases where it just kind of makes more sense to bring over a view than a table. The trade-off, however, which you'll see as this starts to import, if I had only selected tables, it would have automatically recognized all of my foreign key primary relationships. When you use views, it doesn't, so I'll have to build those myself. But I do want you to see how that works, because the other nice thing about PowerPivot is I could bring in data from multiple data sources. I could bring one in from SQL and one in from Oracle, in which case there's obviously no foreign key primary key relationships, but this tool allows me to define them myself. So you're really creating, you can think of a little data mart inside of this Excel file. And you can see it's going pretty quick. It's up to 4.2 million rows right there. It's going to max out right around 5.5 million and be done. And there we go. We've got all of our data. And if you're thinking I have a souped up computer that makes it quick, that's not true. This is a little VM with 8 gigs of RAM, and that's about it. So now you can see for each table or view that I selected, I have a new tab in Excel. So it literally pulled this data into the Excel file. If I jump over to the diagram view, I'll be able to see kind of the relationship of all of these things to each other. So it automatically drew the lines. Those are my relationships. So see here when I hover over this line, it highlights a couple of different fields to show you what the relationship is based on. There we've got state ID is linked to state ID, but there will be a few tables that it didn't link because they're actually views. They're not tables. So I'm going to need to link those myself. So we're just going to kind of drag them over here so we can see them all in one place. And now I need to add those extra relationships. So my membership table, again, that's my main table, remember. It's got all the really good data that I want to see in it. Oof, got away from me there. I need to relate it to organization. That's one field. So I know I have an org ID there. And if I scroll up and look a little bit at organization, I have an org ID there too. So I can just drag it and let it go, and it's going to create that relationship for me. And that's how easy it is to create a foreign key relationship. Let me bring my risk profiles table. You could really spend a lot of time making these look pretty, and I won't do that today. But for now, let's just hook up a few of these. So I'll get my risk is related to risk. Again, you do need to know your data to be able to do this. So that's one thing to be aware of. You need to understand the actual underlying data that's coming from SQL so that you're able to build these relationships and know how the data talks to each other. Here's another one I've got. Product is related to product ID. And I think everything else looks joined at this point. I don't have any floating out there by themselves. One table I did forget to add, it looks like, is my date. So if you do that, if you want to add another table, there's a way to do that. I can just go back to my existing connection and open it and just walk through the wizard again real quick. And there's the one I missed. This is a small one, so it shouldn't take too long. And it kind of stuck it over here by itself, so we'll drag it into the picture. And in this case, my snapshot date is related to my date. So at this point, I do have a working data model. It's not a very pretty one. You can see there's lots of kind of unfriendly names. For example, v_membership's not very friendly, so I might want to rename some of these. I can just right-click on it and rename it and give it a more friendly name, which might just be, for example, membership. If I didn't want the user to see some of these fields when they go to do their reports, build their reports off of this file, then I can hide some of them. So for example, I don't actually need anyone to see my person table. Maybe I don't want them to have that level of detail. I can right-click on the whole table and say Hide from Client Tools. And I also don't need them to see some of these ID fields. So like salary ID versus salary name, I don't need them to see the ID, so I can hide that. So this is where you would really spend a lot of time cleaning up your data model, and it is important to do that really when you're reporting. This is, I think, kind of the most important couple of steps that you're going to do, because once you have a clean data model, you can build as many reports on it as you want, and it will be easier if you take the time here. So obviously I'm not going to do it all today because there's a lot of renaming that would need to happen, and there's a lot of hiding that would need to happen. But just so you see what's going on as a result of this, I've built my data model. I'm going to click the pivot table button, and it asks me where do I want to put it. New worksheet is fine in this case. And now all of a sudden I have a pivot table in Excel. If you've used pivot tables, this is just like any other pivot table in Excel. And there's all of those different tables that I brought in. So if I wanted to start building a report, for example, I might go in and look at this. This stands for end of period. Again, that's one I might want to rename. That's the number of end of period members I have at the end of the year. And again, so you're thinking, well, which year are you talking about? So we might go down to the date table, and we could drag the year over the row, and now we'll see it broken out by years. So very quickly I'm able to start manipulating my data. Now another thing you can see right away is, well, first of all, it's not renamed, so it's hard to use. Second of all, there's no comma. So that's another example where you really would want to spend some more time in this PowerPivot area cleaning those up. So I'm going to rename just a couple of them in my membership table because we're going to be using those throughout the demo today. So this end of period flag I'm just going to call current members. And this one will be new members. And we'll do cancellations. Those are all pretty common statistics to want to track. And the other thing I might want to do with my date is create one of those hierarchies that we talked about. So I'm going to click this tiny little button. When you hover over it, it says create hierarchy. I'm going to call it date. And then I'm going to drag the fields. Whoop, it doesn't like me using date because something, oh, the little field in there is already called date, so I will call it something different. Let's call it report date. And now you drag in the fields in the order that you want them to appear in the hierarchy. So I would have year. I missed. There we go. And I want to drill down from year to quarter. Sometimes it seems like you have to do it twice. I'm not entirely sure why, but I just keep doing it twice. It works. I have two different months in here if you're wondering what that's about. One is the number for the month, like 1 for January, versus the name of the month. And I do that so that the months will sort properly. So it's always a good idea to have the ordinal in there. And then the other thing I want to do is, let's go look at this membership table. So I'm just going to right-click and jump to Go To. And I'm going to highlight that new members field and change it to a whole number with a comma. And same thing for current members, because remember we didn't see the comma there, which wasn't very friendly. And same thing for cancellations. And now when we jump back to Excel with a little small Excel button up here, notice I lost one of my measures that I had in there. Those measures are the things that we count in a cube because I renamed it, so it disappeared. So I have to put it back. It's now called current numbers, and it now has a comma, which is nice. And if I go down and look at my date, as it is without the hierarchy, I would have had to add year and then drag quarter down there and then drag month down there and keep doing that in that fashion. Since I have the hierarchy now, let's clear those out. I can just grab report date, and it automatically has the whole hierarchy here where I can drill down from quarter, that's the month ordinal, remember, and then to the month name. So very quickly we're kind of off and running in that direction. We might also want to show maybe the product group. Go ahead and drag that over into the columns. And we could add a chart to this just like any other pivot table. So we could do pivot chart. Do a column chart, and I'm going to go ahead and move this to its own page. So I just did Control X to cut it and Control V to paste it. And you could do some fun design things if you wanted to make it look a little bit different. We could take advantage of some of the new Excel 2013 tools. There's a slicer. I think the slicer's been around since maybe 2010. Let's slice on product group over here in case we decided we wanted to filter that. So you can see here, if I wanted to zoom in for a minute and only look at government, I could just click on that button. If I want to erase the filter, I can click on the X. There's also a feature called a timeline. I think that one was new in 2013. Oops, wrong one. Timeline. And it's only going to show me the date field. It's kind of smart that way. And let's change from months to quarters. So I could put this one down here and stretch it out. So now I can also use that to dynamically filter my reports. If I only want to look at quarter 1 in 2014, I could click there. If I wanted to look at all of 2014, I could drag it out. Don't have a lot of data in 2014, so let's look at a few more months. So you see it's very interactive. And again, I would want to spend more time cleaning up this data model, but hopefully you get the idea from what you've seen so far. The last thing I did want to show you in the data model, however, because it's kind of an important feature, is that sometimes we need to have those hierarchies like I built for the date, but all of the fields for the hierarchy aren't in the same table. So for example, I want to drill from region to area to state, but those fields are in different tables. And if I try to create a hierarchy here, let's go ahead and do the hierarchy and call it location, it's not going to let me drag a field from over here over there. It's just not allowed. You can see you get the little symbol that tells you it's not allowed. So what I need to do is get them all into the same table. And that's where that calculation, that DAX formula comes in handy. So again, I'm going to jump to Go To, and that takes me to the right tab. Basically puts you back in the data view and goes to the right tab. And I'm going to add a column here using the DAX syntax. It's going to be equals related. And I think the name of my table was geo area, and here you can see area name was the column. That's the one I want, so I'll select that and hit enter. And using the primary key, foreign key relationships, it's going to populate that column. It's basically just saying, okay, pull a copy of that over here based on your relationships in the data model. And I will rename that to be area. And then we'll do the same thing for the region. So again, it's equals related. It has the nice IntelliSense up here that helps us with the formulas if we can't remember them. And region name. And hit enter, and that will populate. And now I'll go ahead and rename that one to region. And if we jump back to diagram view, then we'll see over here all this column. So now I just want to drag that into my location hierarchy. We'll go from region to area and then to state. And again, what you'd really want to do is spend some more time cleaning up your data model. I really can hide this whole table because now I have my hierarchy in the other table, so I'm just going to hide those from the client view. You can use the Shift key to select multiple things that you want to hide at once. Or maybe it's the Control key. There we go, Control key. And right-click and hide those. So again, that's where most of your time will be spent in these exercises. Let's go back to Excel and see how that looks. So I click on my pivot chart, and now I should see over here under, to remember what I called it. Oh, I didn't rename that one very nice. It's geo-state province still, but you can see location has region, area, state name. So there's my little hierarchy similar to the date one. And whenever you do finish your data model and you're ready to publish it, then we would just go to File, Save As. I want to put it in SharePoint. It remembers that I've been here, but you can type in the URL to your PowerPivot gallery. And I'm going to call this one Webinar and save it. So at this point is uploading that document to SharePoint so that it can be shared with other users. You can see down here in the little status bar it says that it's updating, so it's going to take a minute. It does have 5.5 million records or more in it. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my SharePoint site so you can see what that looks like. Oops. jumped out of my full screen mode, and go over to PowerPivot. So this is the PowerPivot gallery. Basically, it's a nice Silverlight view of all of the reports in my library. It should clear up here the resolution in a minute. It's thinking hard. There we go, a little bit better. Let's see, this one has the hourglass in front of it. That's because it's the new one that I just saved, and it hasn't generated this little thumbnail view of it yet. So that's why it has the hourglass. If we give it another few seconds, it will update and we'll be able to see the other reports. But you can kind of get an idea. Some of these are Excel. I think that one is Excel. That one is Excel. This is a Power View. So we've got all these different kinds of reports stored in our PowerPivot gallery. I can also change, there's a different view in here called, this is the carousel, which you can see why it's named that. There's also a gallery view. So that one's a little bit different, where it shows us each of the reports that we've created and saved. And if it's an Excel workbook, it shows you all of the different tabs or worksheets that you have in Excel, so you can mouse over them. And if it's Power View, they have what they're called views inside of their it's not worksheets, it's actually views, so you can mouse over the different views to see them. And if we scroll down, we should be able to see our new one here shortly. There it is, webinar, and it's generated its little thumbnails now. I could click on that, and this actually uses Excel services. So remember that one we gave a quick overview of Excel services? Notice this is showing me the report in the browser. So I'm not using Excel at this point. I'm just looking at it through SharePoint and don't have to have the client. It's still interactive. I can still use my slicers and my timelines through the browser. And I have a link to open in Excel if I wanted to do that. I can also refresh the data from here. I could also schedule it through the UI to refresh it on a regular basis. So again, you get all that great functionality, and so far all you've used is Excel and PowerPivot. So let's go ahead and go back one step. And we're going to start to jump into a little bit of Power View at this point. So you can see when I hover over some of these files that have three little icons here in the corner, that tells me that that particular Excel file has a PowerPivot cube inside of it. So they don't all have that. This is Power View. It doesn't have one. I want to go down to my webinar one and go ahead and click that middle button. That middle button is for Power View. It's basically saying I want to create a Power View report using that particular workbook as my data source. So again, you can see what it's loaded up here for all of my data. Pieces look very similar to what it looked like in Excel earlier. So if we want to build one of these, we'll go ahead and I'm just going to click anywhere on the screen. Actually, let's give it a title first. So I'm going to call it Membership Stats. And then I click anywhere else on the screen, and I start looking at things that I might want to report on. So current members, I didn't give all of these commas, so you'll see, again, pays to spend time in your data model. But I've got current members, new members, and cancellations. And let's look at that by maybe the region. And let's turn that into what they call a card. So it's a little bit easier to read. I want to make it a little bit bigger. So now I very quickly can see my major regions and the current members, the new members, and the cancellations in those regions. And all of this is just, point and click, drag and drop. I'll move this over and make it a little bit smaller so we have room for more components. Now if I want to add another kind of, I don't know what you call these, they're not really web parts, I call them gadgets or widgets on the Power View sides. I just click anywhere else in a blank space, and I can decide what new thing I'd like to report on. So this time I might want to use my salary range and look at maybe who are all the people who left, my cancellations, what salary range am I in? And it looks like I missed a primary key. We can go back and fix that. See right there how all the answers are the same? That means that I did not drag one of my primary key foreign key relationships for salary. So we'll try a different one. See if I can change this to maybe risk. I think I have risk in here. the risk description. I'll see if I hooked that one up properly or not. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. And maybe we'll break it out by another field. We could look at the product as well. And let's make that one maybe a stacked bar chart. See how that looks? So we just click on that button, resize it a little bit, and there we go. And there's a limited amount of formatting that you can do with these things. So as you can see, there's not a whole lot of buttons on the ribbon to play with. One thing we could do, if I wanted to, maybe was move that legend. So I could just click on the chart and jump over to the Layout tab. And for legend, I could maybe put it on the bottom. So a couple of real easy things like that you can do. Let's have a look at another one. We'll try again, see if we can get information. So you always want to know why people left us, and the most you can answer about those. So we're going to look at our cancellations by product group alone and split it out of the pie chart this time so we can get an idea what percentages of our products we're experiencing the most cancellations. And again, you just kind of drag it and move it around to wherever you'd like it to be. And we'll do one more on this page. Let's look at our new members, people that just joined us. And maybe we can look at it by time. So I've got my report date here. We might want to see year and quarter. And that would probably make a good column chart. Then you can also add slicers, similar to what we did in Excel when we added slicers. Again, click anywhere on the blank part of the view and go find the thing that you want to slice or filter with. In this case, let's go ahead. A lot of people may only be interested in maybe the current year, so I'm going to select year, and then I'm going to click on the slicer button. So what that did is I can now just click on one of these years, and you'll see that the other gadgets all updated very quickly. So it's just taking that as a filter value. And there's a little eraser icon if I want to erase that. And we could do one more slicer. Again, click anywhere empty. We don't have a lot of different pieces of data to play with, so seeing a little reuse of the same ones. But in this case, we'll do year and product slicer. So I could click on just government. And you see those update. And let's add one more view. So they call them views, these sort of pages in the Power View reports. So if I go to the Home tab, I can insert a new view. And let's call this one, where are my members? And I want to know where they actually reside, where they live. So go into membership and grab that current member statistic and go into my location. And you can see there's, let's actually use, see if it will recognize state name or not. We'll try that. There we go. I click the map button, and it's gone out and talked to Bing using the APIs. It recognized all the names of my states, and it's given me a bubble chart so that basically you look for the larger bubbles or where most of your current members are. So I can see here in North Carolina, I have almost 500,000 customers. Up here in Washington, same thing, a lot of customers. Very small dot in Alaska, not as many memberships there. So that's probably the easiest map I've ever been able to create in any reporting tool. This is very complicated to do in Report Builder. You really have to get into a lot of developer type of task to be able to do that. And you saw right here it was just like 3 or 4 clicks and it was done. So very easy to do in this tool. Now I want to go ahead and save this before we go much farther. So I click the Save button. It is defaulted to the location where I am right now, which is my PowerPivot. That awful acronym is the name of my website on my dev environment. So this is the URL of my dev environment box. I'm going to call this Webinar Power View and save it. And then the other cool thing you can do with this is you can also export it. So if I go to the file, I can export it to PowerPoint. You see there it says it's exporting. It's kind of a two-step process here. It's a little misleading because it says it's complete, but then it says save. So it's kind of built the file ready to export, but then you have to save it somewhere. So I will put it on my desktop, call it Webinar Export. Now if we go out here and have a look at our desktop, there it is, Webinar Export. And when I open this, notice it's PowerPoint. Again, there's just an infinite number of P's in the business intelligence world for Microsoft. So it looks just like Power View, but I mean, again, try to notice it is just in PowerPoint. It is just a slide that's not part of SharePoint anymore. We're out of Excel, all those things. But despite that fact, when we go into slideshow mode, as long as I have an active connection to the internet site where this data resides, and I can authenticate to it, then I'm going to be able to click this Interact button. And just like you saw when I was in SharePoint working with it, I can interact with this data in that same way. So you can go to your meeting with your 2 slides, and someone asks you a question to drill into the data, and they say, well, what did that look like just for 2012? And you click on it, and you've answered your question. So it makes for a pretty awesome slide deck. Again, another way that you can filter data that's interesting in Power View is you can actually click on the different gadgets on the slide. So if I click on just the northeast, see if I can click properly. Maybe I clicked too fast. I'll try a different one. Oh, now I lost it. Well, you can see there I did it a little bit. So if I click on a piece of the pie is actually really easy to tell. Let me click on this red piece. See, everything else just kind of dims in the background. All these different charts get the little gray areas. So instead of completely filtering the data out, it just kind of highlights the government section. So I can see for the 4 quarters in 2012, those little thin slices that are highlighted are the government data, which is different. It gives you more of an idea of the percentage or the proportion versus filtering it out altogether. If I just click on government, then I can't compare it to student and to general. So you have 2 different ways to filter your data there. And same thing for the map. If I go to the next slide, oops, I went too far. I passed it. But same thing with the map. It's still interactive. You can still hover. You can still click. All of those different things. So again, very powerful slide deck to be able to present, and even having only 2 slides, it might actually seem like you have 6 or 7 slides. So this is how it loads in. Again, this is just PowerPoint right now. And you can zoom on the map, you can zoom in, you can zoom out, you can pan, you can do all those things that you would be able to do in Bing. And they have different views as well. This is just an aerial grayscale. You can put aerial with the different colors, the blue water and the green mountains. You can do road views, lots of different options there. So to jump back for a moment, we talked about PowerPivot. We went into Excel and we were able to build our data model. And you can still come in here and tweak it, but again, really can't stress enough that you want to do this work up front, because, for example, you saw when I renamed my end of period flag to current members, it took it out of my chart. And it's going to do that. If I rename things now and other people were using them in charts, it's going to pull that measure out and they're going to have to go re-add it. So really spend a lot of time here bringing your data together, cleaning it up, renaming it, creating the relationships. You can then go to Excel and use it as the reporting tool itself. You can kind of stop here with Excel and do all of your webs and charts. And you can make this look a little cleaner. So for example, if I just went over to View, I could get rid of my grid lines. That would be a good start. I could hide these buttons that are on the chart. It's on here somewhere. I just have to remember exactly what tab they put it on. There it is, field buttons. Let's say hide all. So now it's a little bit cleaner. So you can really get to something that when you save it in SharePoint, it doesn't look like that's an Excel file anymore. And I just saved that, so I'm going to jump back over to SharePoint to see what that looks like. I actually have an example right here as well. Let me show you this one. It's actually the same set of data, but just a different workbook. I did it on a different day. So as you can see, this looks very clean. I actually created a page in SharePoint. Here you can see it's Pages, Excel Web Access at ASPX, and I added the Excel Web Access web part to that page. So I don't have to always take the user directly into the library, the PowerPivot library. I can put them on SharePoint pages, and I can mix them with other web parts and with other content so that the user is able to see it mixed that way. And again, it's still, through the web part, it's still interactive. I could have chosen to hide that web part, the pivot chart fields probably would have been a little bit nicer there, but it's still very easy to come in and interact and use my slicer and, again, all Excel. Or you don't have to stop there. You can go into Power View, which we did, and create some of those visually appealing charts using that tool, which is perfect, I think, for ad hoc users, power users. It's really very quick to pick up on. So that is the gist of it, all the way through from the SQL data to the Power View report. And we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions. I'm going to turn it back to John at this point. And we are going to need, there's a bunch of questions, so give me a moment. I'm going to look at them and group some together so I can answer as many of them at once.
All right. Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you very much, Anne. I apologize for that audio issue there. I wanted to go through a few last things here. First and foremost, I wanted to thank everyone for coming here today. After the webinar, you're going to have a quick 4-question survey, just asking about how you heard from us and a few other things. If you wouldn't mind taking a quick moment to fill that out, we would greatly appreciate it. We want to make sure this content is relevant to your team and make sure you don't have any questions about that or any advice, any thoughts. I would very much appreciate that. Also, for the course that we've talked about several times here today, obviously that's in September on the 23rd and 24th, coming up soon. We're going to give you guys a 25% discount on the course. Anyone interested in registering for that, and the code will just be BI25, and anyone who enters that will get a 25% discount there. So I'll follow up with a link to the recording for this webinar as well as this discount code, but feel free to use that. Love to have you in the course. And if you have any questions about the course, specifically about the course, material it covers, would like to see some more information on it, just feel free to reach out to us. My contact information is there at the bottom right, John Elam, and love to talk with you about that. And just feel free to reach out. I can connect you with Anne if you have questions more relevant to her and the like. But thank you all very much. I'll turn it back to Anne to answer a few quick questions here over the next couple minutes.
Okay. So I do see a lot of questions regarding what's available in which tool. So all of the tools that I showed you today, they're all available in SharePoint 2010 and SharePoint 2013. There are some small features within each tool that may not be available. So the best example I can give you of that is with PowerPivot. With PowerPivot in SharePoint 2010, you couldn't create hierarchies yet. In 2013 you can. So you still get PowerPivot, you can still kind of get to the end report you're using, but there's a couple of those kind of niceties that they didn't come out with until 2013. But absolutely all of the tools that I showed you today are available. A lot of the tools that I showed you, remember, they're SQL based. So Power View and Report Builder are part of SQL reporting services, and PowerPivot is part of the SQL Studio as well. So what matters is that you install the right version of SQL. So if you are using SharePoint 2010, you want to install SQL 2012 SP1 or higher, and that's how you're going to see all of these different new tools. Even though they came out after SharePoint 2010 came out, you'll be able to see them in SharePoint. I actually have a demo box that's exactly like this one. And Let me go ahead and look at the next question. Is it most common to use Power View in conjunction with the PowerPivot cube? I would say absolutely yes. You would either use it with PowerPivot or with analysis services, but it needs to have what's called a BI semantic model underneath of it, which is basically a fancy word for a cube. You wouldn't use it just on a flat SQL table because it wouldn't be able to do all that slicing and dicing that you saw today. There's another question about, is there any difference for SharePoint Online, Office 365? The answer is yes, there is a difference. They call the tool offering there Power BI, and it does not include Report Builder, but it does include the other tools that you saw today. And there's a question about the requirements or prerequisites for the course that's coming up. That is actually listed on the website, or you can email either one of these contacts that you see on the screen. They can answer your question if you don't find it on the website. But basically, you need to have familiarity with Excel, and some familiarity with SQL would be good as well. But the labs that I've created for the course are very specific with screenshots of everything. So I imagine you will be able to find your way through it, even with only limited experience in those areas. Another question, what if you need to manipulate data from text of Excel files? That sounds like a more complicated question than I can answer in the next couple of minutes, so you're welcome to contact us and I can follow up to get more details of what you mean there. But you can do some of the manipulation through that DAX formula that's available. Remember, I created my related columns using those formulas, so you could certainly do some manipulation there. You can also use Excel as a data source, so if you're joining your SQL data with some data that actually just lives in an Excel file, you can bring it in that way and work with it. So hopefully that answers your question. And as far as retyping the YouTube site, I'll have to get John to speak to that in a moment. I believe it was /Protiviti/SP. And how do you publish the charts to SharePoint? Well, you just saw how I published the charts to SharePoint. We did that. So when I saved the file to SharePoint, it actually showed up automatically in the PowerPivot gallery. And then the second example that I showed you with the Excel chart on the page, I just basically, same thing, I saved the file to SharePoint, and then I used the Excel Web Access web part, which is included out of the box with SharePoint. And one of the configurations for that web part says give me the URL of the worksheet that you would like me to display. So that's a very simple configuration. Will you demonstrate working with SharePoint? Okay, so the question is, will you demonstrate working with SharePoint list data and analysis of the date? So SharePoint list data will be supported in a couple of different tools. Bringing it into PowerPivot, I would say, it's certainly possible, and we have done it here many times, but not for the faint of heart. There's a white paper from Microsoft. And you know, whenever there's a white paper, it means it's going to be complicated. It's like 50 pages long. But if you really need to walk through a step-by-step example of doing that, I would say go ahead and Google, you know, Microsoft PowerPivot SharePoint list data source, and you'll see the white paper, and it's got everything outlined for you. And let me see, I think we have time for one or more. John, actually, can you answer the question? Please repeat the YouTube site when I type the URL. Was it /Protiviti/?
So thank you guys very much. The link to the YouTube channel will be coming out attached along with the recording. So the recording, a link to the recording will be coming with the follow-up email and a link to further information on the course. So everyone will be receiving that, but it's just our YouTube channel, and you should expect that in your inbox here in the next day or so.
Great. And the last one I think we have time for, I wanted to know if the Interact button that you saw in PowerPoint was only in Office 2013, and the answer is no, it is also in Office 2010. So that will work in either tool. So thank you very much for coming today, and please feel free to contact us for any follow-ups, and I hope I'll see some of you at the training in McLean or online at the training in McLean in a couple of weeks.
All right, thank you guys as well. And one final reminder, for the course that's coming up, you don't need anything. So as long as you have a computer that works, just feel free to sign up for the course. We provide everything, the virtual environment, all of the connection points. So just make sure you got access to an internet if you're not in the DC area, and you got a computer that's good to go, and I'd love to help you out. So if you have any questions about if your computer's working or not, or up to snuff, feel free to send me an email, and I will give you some test sites, and we can make sure that works. But otherwise, I look forward to having as many of you as possible at the course that's coming up, and thank you again very much for coming.